Hello and welcome to From Seed to Sky, Conversations on Roots, Resilience, and Rising. And so we're talking about different conversations on resilience, and we'll explore this through different facets and different lenses. And today I have Collin Hoctor here, and we're going to share about how ketamine specifically can foster resilience and healing through accessing our own internal resources through the use of this powerful medicine. So,
Mm.
Collin is a LMFT, licensed marriage and family therapist with a foundation in existential philosophy and transpersonal psychology. His work bridges traditional psychotherapy with somatic and psychedelic assisted approaches, including ketamine-assisted therapy and psilocybin research. His approach is relational, somatic, and grounded in the belief that healing happens through connection with self, others, and the natural world. He's particularly interested in how co-regulation with the relational field, including our relationship with the more than human world, can foster integration, belonging, and a return to embodied aliveness. And we're doing an immersion, the ketamine assisted immersion, coming up starting in October. So
Mhm.
I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. We've had lots of
Yeah, me too.
discussion, and this is going to be a great continued conversation between us.
Absolutely.
So I love to start these conversations with just what are your daily practices? What are the things that strengthen your own roots, nurture your resilience, or help you rise in the face of the challenges that might feel overwhelming, whether that's related to medicine or not?
Yeah, such a great question. And the honest answer is they seem to always be shifting. Um, I'm definitely someone that has always been a seeker of what is again always changing. Sometimes it's a seeker of escape and chaos. Sometimes it's a seeker of release and adventure. Um, and lately, I'd say the last few years specifically, I've been really looking for stability. It's not something that I'm necessarily attracted to emotionally, bodily, somatically, mentally. I'm always kind of looking for that flux and that chaos and those little opportunities to jump off the deep end in some way. And so the last few years, specifically, especially with having our little daughter, um, finding those places of quiet, of stability, um, that space where there's really nothing, but also something.
Mm.
I know it's very ambiguous, it's very nebulous. That's part of the intention, because there's not really a single thing. But what that could look like is moments of sitting in a coffee shop and watching people, just kind of being with, watching the busyness, kind of imagining what people are doing, what they're up to. I really enjoyed when I was in Tacoma. I had an office in Tacoma, Washington, and right down the street was Wright Park, this really, really old grounds of some estate, the Wright estate. And they'd have these really beautiful trees, and I loved just walking through the trees. And it was such a big park that it's generally pretty quiet. Um, Getting out into nature, sitting by water, those things where it's just that the kind of peaceful stillness where there's nothing to do, and a seal floating by in the water is the most interesting thing that happens that walk or that moment. Those are the times that I really find that grounding and that stability. And now that I moved to California, the practice is a little bit different. I'm kind of readjusting to the landscape. um, but similarly to my time in Tacoma, heading out to the coast, so driving through the redwoods, hitting the Russian River where it meets the Pacific Ocean, and just kind of bringing my binoculars out, watching the birds, the seals, that kind of stuff. So, a lot of it's in nature, quiet, peaceful, grounding.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. I also appreciate how like our practices can be intentional towards like chaos versus
Yeah.
towards grounding and stability, and how like one's not better than the other, but
Mm,
think of one as like, oh, we're trying to get more grounded. But like actually like chaos can be spontaneity, and it can be playful, and it can be fun, it can be exciting. And like
yeah.
we can also foster those things specifically as well, just depending. And like nature is such a beautiful example of that too, because nature is completely chaotic and it's grounded and still and
Mhm.
stable. It's like everything. And to be able to watch
Yeah.
the rushing river into the ocean that can be like deep and still and also like completely enormous and magnanimous.
Absolutely. That's a great kind of point to pin in on, because I think a lot of times in therapy practices or spiritual practices, there is, and rightly so, a bias towards meditation, towards the quiet, towards still, towards movement, intentional movement. Um, and a lot of times things break, whether we can't take it anymore, or a relationship fails, or we lose a job, or the political climate kind of throws everything into an upheaval. And the I love what you're saying about that analogy to nature, because it's in those moments of big shifts, whether it's a forest fire and then the mushrooms, the morels come through, and then the little saplings come up, and it's a different landscape. It's in that upheaval and tumult that can look really unpleasant and bad, that sometimes the big things start to happen. And I think that being able to notice that, to know that the tide ebb and flows, things come and go, it gets high, it gets low. And being able to ride that wave, so to speak, is really important. And a lot of times it's good to have fun, it's good to be intense, it's good to have some kind of movement of the needle in order to appreciate that the subtleties and the quiet moments as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like even just like riding the wave is like such a metaphor for resilience a lot of the times. And so
Mm,
it's how do you personally define resilience?
man, I've been sitting with that question for a while now. It's such a good question, and I thought I had it so many times. Oh, that's it. Um, and I've pulled from a few different sources. So one of the theories or models that I really like is this idea of like anti-fragile.
Mm,
And the uh, the description that the person uses is like, so if you have a glass vase or whatever glasses in a package, and it goes through the mail and it gets beat up and kind of like drenched, and then thrown in the back of the van, tussled around, then it makes it to its destination. It's seen it through. It's kind of I'm forgetting the word now, of course, but it's made it to the other side, right? And so often, that's one of our goals. We kind of think about like, oh, I made it through.
mm,
Open the box, and the glass is kind of broken, and yeah, we can fix it and repair it, and there's ways to do that. So that's one way. And then anti-fragile is, imagining that same vase or glass piece, same situation, gets kind of tossed around, box gets crushed, rained on, da da da. But every time there's something that happens, that piece of glass gets stronger. And so
mm,
it makes it to the other side, the same destination, but instead of needing repair and, kind of someone to figure out what to do with it, it's actually built in its strength and its ability to kind of handle and weather those those challenges in a way. And so I really like that for resilience. Kind of maybe the way to apply it to a person would be to say that, we're learning from our mistakes, we're growing from the things that are painful and unpleasant. Um, Maybe in Buddhism, we might call that like focusing on the first arrow. So we get shot with
mm,
one arrow, it totally sucks, it's painful, and then we start complaining about it and like wallowing in our pity, and so we kind of like shoot ourselves with the second arrow. Now we've got two to deal with instead of just that first one. So we're kind of moving from the suffering and the story into the pain of the thing. And yeah, it was unpleasant, and I'd rather not get tossed around and jostled and kind of crushed. And the ability to kind of see the bigger picture, that we're maybe learning from it or growing in some way, or it's challenging us. Um, and then this other idea that I was kind of sitting with is, kind of the alchemical model of transmuting
Mm.
elements. So, I'm kind of using my basic understanding, because resilience kind of implies challenge, right? It's not just like we don't say I was resilient. I wouldn't say that I was resilient if I took a walk around the block. For some people, that would be a big kind of marker of success and achievement. But for me, I wouldn't necessarily say that. So resilience kind of implies a challenge, um, and so whether it's me alone in my skill set, or being able to tap into friends or mentors or support groups, can I see through this moment of challenge and transmute my kind of basic skill set and understanding to something that's a little bit not necessarily like higher in a better sense, but different, able to handle and hold what's happening, my place in it, and maybe a bigger picture, you know.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, when you're talking about the glass, it reminded me of post-traumatic growth. Of
Right.
like when we
Yeah.
go through a traumatic experience, like how we actually can grow from it and become stronger.
Hmm.
And the research that's happening around post-traumatic growth is really fascinating. The difference
Yeah.
between post-traumatic stress. And then I also
Absolutely.
really appreciate the third kind of definition that you talked about around like we can't actually do this alone. I think there's
Mm,
like having community that we're not trying to figure it out on our own and recreate everything on our own, but like there's so many resources we can tap into, whether that's another human or a group or nature or our dog or whatever it is that there's so many resilience teachers out there that we can
yeah.
go to.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for reminding me of that post-traumatic growth. I love that. That fits really, really well. Someone said, I think Caroline Casey is kind of a out there astrologer type. She kind of shifted the word. She said, "What if trauma, instead of using the word trauma, we used a dangerous and beautiful assignment?"
Mm,
And so it's almost like trauma as an initiation. And I'm very kind of cautious to just say, like, yeah, this is great. This trauma is, there's some really painful things that we move through as people, and I wouldn't wish them on anybody, even if it's in the service of growth. And if we kind of use them as this burden or this weight that we've been carrying around, and never really move it from there, we lose that growth
mhm,
aspect of it. We kind of lose that the dangerous and beautiful assignment, which says, like, okay, so what are we going to do with it now?
mhm,
How can we carry this terrible experience that we went through as a soft, sensitive being, and transmute, grow, changed, and almost always, they say the kind of wounded healer archetype, that a lot of
mhm,
healers have to move from their own wounds and their own experiences. And again, that kind of implies that some sort of trouble, some sort of pain, suffering is needed in order for us to move to this next level, chapter, um, the next scene in our play here.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then speaking about you as a healer, can you
Yeah,
talk a little bit about how ketamine has been supportive for your own resilience?
yeah, yeah. I'm so glad that we get to talk about the medicine in terms of resilience. Such a really cool framework. Um, so yeah, I mean, ketamine was pretty instantly outrageous. It was pretty instantly transformative, healing. I mean, I have so many words to describe it. Um, but really, it is that kind of like shaking up of the snow globe in a lot of ways. And the research is pretty clear at this point that most psychedelics are changing the neural structure and the way that the brain's communicating with itself. So, you know, on the other, just pause that. On the other side, we have, you know, PTSD, or any kind of like trauma, anxiety, depression, which really hardwires our brains in a kind of a shortcut way. So, if we've gone through a traumatic experience, the brain's job as a survival species is to shortcut everything so that we never get hurt again. We never go through that again. And so then we have things like generalized anxiety. So it's hard to leave the house or be around people because at some point I was hurt and now my physiology is protecting me so that I'm always anxious and always afraid and then always safe. It's always kind of where it's coming down to, at least in kind of my lens, is we're always coming down to safety, and sometimes that's a little bit overdone. You know, in Santa Cruz, California, I went to school. There was a Vietnam vet. So this was in 2005. So obviously Vietnam was, 30 plus years ago, and he still had trouble July 4th. It's like, so
Mhm.
he's been through at least 30 July 4ths, knew exactly what was happening, but every time would relapse on his drug of choice on July 4th because there was fireworks which reminded him of the war. So there's the knowing, I know that it's the fireworks, and then there's the experience of what the physiology is doing, which is kind of rooted in the way the brain's communicating. Um, so we kind of need something to shake that up sometimes, and it's very hard, I find, with even the best psychological models, even the best therapy, the best modalities, because I'm still using my thinking brain and my
Mhm.
whole being is structured to keep me safe on the old belief system. Ketamine for me instantly transformed the way that I viewed fill in the blank everything. Whether it was my body, my place in the universe. Um, the story I like to tell is, my wife did the thing that always bothers me. It's kind of our little dance. That this was the day after I came home from my first session, and I remember just I watched the part of me that always reacts kind of like sputter into dust, and I was and then there was me who was being able to stay present to that thing that always gets me. And I remember we kind of like looked at each other, and I'm like I'm not even reacting to it, and she was realizing that I wasn't reacting to it. And I mean, it was almost like I could feel that new neural pathway just open up, and it was just this beautiful moment of like, wow, this really really is working. Something's different. Um, and so instead of considering myself and kind of my smallness, which tends to be a thing kind of in the world for me, just kind of like, what's happening to me? Am I safe? I was considering this much bigger landscape, cosmic, universal, considering the world differently, watching my brain function differently in real time. And that really just kind of turned a lot of my considerations on their head. As far as what it means to be healing, how do I, who's got advanced degrees, who's done the trainings, who's been doing this thing for 10 years, and all of a sudden, in the matter of an hour treatment, things are completely different. So it really facilitated this experiential shift in my world that was undeniable. I mean, it was very clear at that point that there's something here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty, it's amazing. Those things that like you don't even plan, but then they just sort of happen. And you're like,
Mhm.
oh, that wouldn't have happened like that
Mhm, mhm.
2 days ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing. I feel like you answered this, but I'm going to ask the question anyway.
Sure.
So, like, what specific kind of challenges or experiences have you witnessed ketamine helping, and how has that been different from more like traditional, either talk therapy or other, even like we're both somatic type therapists? What's different about ketamine from other therapies that you've seen?
What I really like about um, medicine in this way, and ketamine absolutely is included in that, is it takes me as the therapist out of the equation. It doesn't matter if I'm catching the right words or the right movements or the right thoughts. It doesn't matter what skill set I'm bringing. I'll come back to that because that's not quite true. But really, in the moment, it's this internal journey for the other person. It's their landscape, it's their symbols, it's their emotions, it's their process that I'm really just there to make sure that in the moment that their body is safe, and that's pretty much it, especially with ketamine specifically, because it is a dissociative. It's different than some of the other psychedelics. Um, And I'm sure you've seen too, like it's generally a pretty quiet experience as the facilitator. I'm the person's kind of laying there, they look like they're asleep. And meanwhile, I know that there's this like, wild experience happening. And so I kind of wait patiently for that return.
Mhm.
And then we get to talk about it. And, so there would be the integration piece would be where my role comes in a little bit stronger. What am I thinking about it? How do I make sense of it? What's my, training and practice and understanding? Um, but I've really seen it. Feel like am I answering the question? I feel like I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
started.
yeah.
Okay.
You're perfect. You're
Oh, compared to other modalities, gotcha. I really love that it's an internal process, and I've liked that about the somatic practices too, because we're drawing attention to the other person's body. What do you notice? Where do you feel that? Is there a color? So it's really this internally directed thing that in the somatic practices I might be kind of facilitating or giving little hints to, also co-regulating. But with the medicine, it's very much an inside job, so to speak, where the person's own internal world speaks to them in a way that they didn't even know was possible. And a lot of times when they come back, and again, I'm sure you've seen it, it's just like, what the heck was that? Oh, what? And so the brain comes back online and it's trying to understand based on a very limited kind of vocabulary. And then we get to really sit with it and be like, okay, so what does that remember Lord of the Rings for me is always a very potent kind of visual in my journeys. And so, okay, so what did the Eye of Sauron mean in this context? It's like, okay, right. So I moved from fear, like, oh my gosh, it's like in the tarot when people pull the death card, it's like, what's bad's gonna happen? And it's like, no, there's just, something transforming here. Something's, dying or kind of falling away. And so we move from a very logical, linear understanding of this means that to inviting the body, the emotions, the internal mythology is really kind of what I think is part of it, that starts to communicate with us in a new way. And our job is to really hold space for it and allow it to move through us and to pay attention and to hear and um, to kind of watch for those shifts and those signs.
Yeah, yeah. It's beautiful. I love that internal mythology, and I feel like that's so true. And
Mm,
how, as a yoga therapist, like there's so much of me that's trying to like get out of the way and like let people's internal somatic experience guide the work. But then with ketamine, it's like I'm not even talking. I'm just sitting there. And it's like, but there's so much happening, even though I'm not doing anything, but there's so much
yeah.
happening within the context of sitting and holding space for people to do work. But like, I don't have to like analyze it or figure it out or come up with something smart to say
Hmm,
or like
hmm.
come up with some meditation, which is all fine and good. And I love that part of my work too, but it's just a really different way to work in medicine space where I get to sit back even more and just trust
Hmm.
this person's gonna find their healing through their own way, which is how my orientation is anyway as a yoga therapist. Just feels like I
Yeah,
can deepen into that even more in medicine
yeah,
space.
absolutely. I love that. And I think generally speaking, a lot of people that come to ketamine come to it because I feel like it's advertised as kind of an antidepressant. It's a pharmaceutical. If you feel bad, take this thing. A lot of clinics advertise it pretty black and white. Um, Kind of leave that broader conversation there. So a lot of people don't have necessarily the same psychological understanding. They don't have the same spiritual understanding. They might be like a fairly like normal person, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but just kind of someone that hasn't really considered things and has followed all the rules of society and our culture and is doing really well. I mean, I'm always kind of surprised by like the amazing people that I meet through this medicine and has never really opened up to a spiritual practice or a, even like tried therapy. Definitely hasn't done any, a lot of people haven't done any psychedelics, so it's kind of scary. So this pharmaceutical field is very safe. And so we those folks, and I would broadly say that we as a culture, and I'm using that term with a giant asterisk, kind of whatever that means, but we don't have the same stories. I can imagine at one point there was, even in the United States, there was a post, World War II, there was a coherent story that we have, this narrative. You kind of look at these different the posters and stuff that it was very clear what the job was and who we were as a culture. The hippie movement, there was a story there. This was the culture, the beats. Generally speaking, I don't think we have a story that kind of brings us together. In fact, a lot of our stories that are active culturally split us apart. They highlight differences, they highlight separations, and whether that's something that we're doing to each other, at the very least, I'm doing it to myself. I'm not good enough. I'm bad. Nobody likes me. Like, look, I don't have what that person has. And then all of a sudden now this medicine kind of offers this new language, this new understanding where um, um, I'm able to write my own story in a way. I'm able to understand my world through these new symbols that are coming from me. And what I love about specifically group psychedelic experiences or group integration experiences is now we're telling our individual stories together, right?
Mm.
And that's always been the most exciting part about integration, where I'm like, you saw what? You went where? Oh my gosh, like how was that? And the themes, yeah, there's so many exciting things, but I really think that psychedelics as a practice, um, but really a cultural practice, but also, and even more potently for an individual practice, gives us our story, our narrative, our own mythos back. And so now I have this kind of guiding image or principle or idea that I can carry with me, whether it's an active thought. My values change, and so I'm carrying myself as like this type of person, whether it's I'm forgiving myself for things that happened in the past because I understand it through this new lens, or I'm moving about a little bit more curious and open in a world that has felt maybe harsh or mean or critical. You know, the the internal landscape and then the relational field changes when these experiences happen. Obviously, we can spend a lot of time talking about the neurobiology and how that shifts. Most people don't feel that; they feel the experiential change
Yeah.
and the stories too.
Yeah. 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 And I feel like it's important to talk about intention and integration because it's also kind of
Mm,
named, but I was actually just talking with somebody yesterday who was like, "What do you mean by integration?" I was like, "Such a good question
Such
because
a good question.
what do we mean by integration and what do we mean by intention?" And so, what have you seen around intention setting and integration that has either
Mm,
made it difficult for things to stick, for lack of a better word, it's probably not the right word, or
okay.
to to actually integrate them into like now every time you see your wife do that thing, you're like, yep, it fizzled. Or does it like did it last for 48 hours or that neuroplastic window
Yeah,
and
yeah.
did you rebound back to the old way? And what have you noticed about that around
Oh man,
that work?
good question. Okay, so there's a few things in there. I would say that the simplest way that I view intention and integration is kind of a bookend. Um, and that's not a hard stop on either side. I think it's just an opening and then kind of an opening that way too. Can't really
Mm.
get that like a funnel kind of shape. Anyway,
Yeah.
but I really love both of those pieces because I think it really helps the brain. Um, you know, One of the models I really like is when they talk about the default mode network. So it helps my default way of moving about the world kind of get primed for this experience. because the default mode network's job is to keep everything just understandable, organized, easily accessible. Yeah, sorry, all the stories going through my head right now. And so the intention process, um, which I think it should be a process. It's not just like forgiveness. That could be where we end up is forgiveness. But the consideration moving into that, what does that mean? How did I come to that? Is it forgiving myself? Is it forgiving others? Is it forgiving God? Is it forgiving nature? There's so much about that. And I think as long as we're in the process of considering that, the mind's getting ready to have a different experience, right? Because we're kind of inherently challenging some of these beliefs and ideas and the very language that our world is built on. So what do we want from this? What are we asking? It's also a really great tool. Um, I want to say, I'll say specifically with psychedelics, to kind of use in the midst of a really difficult moment.
Mm,
Um, so trying to think of a good example. Yeah, there was a moment for me where I was really lost in kind of the typical psychedelic geometric insanity. And I don't mean that in a bad way, just there's no real word for it. Um, and and I remember the pulling the intention back, and I think funny enough, I think it was forgiveness. Um, and so I was kind of lost in these sheets of kind of geometric shapes and shifting almost dimensions that were just kind of moving through me and over me. And it was very disorienting. There's no up, down, no direction. And I remember just kind of bringing in that word forgiveness, and it didn't change, but it kind of brought me back to myself in a little
mm,
bit different way. And that was all it needed, was just like, okay, that's what we're doing here. So I
mm,
wasn't lost in the experience. There was actually some coherence, and I don't think that that's necessarily the right move or the wrong move, but it was a move. And the moment that kind of brought me back, I was able to take a deep breath and kind of continue on, without the panic, because we're in a body. The
right.
body's going to get worried at some point when things are just happening. And so that kind of like cools the system down a little bit to remember that.
Mm,
So there's a few functions, I think, for the intention. Then on the other side, the integration, which um, is so open-ended. I think that's really important to name. Is a lot of times, like a lot of the clinics that I worked at, it's like, okay, you have a prep session, and then you have whatever, 3 or 6 integration sessions, or one integration after each infusion. Um, Great, that's way more than most people get, and I think that's spectacular. And it's your world's changing. This is a whole reality shift that in a lot of ways is being invited. You started the journey of ketamine because something wasn't working. You wanted to change, and then we get it. And the truth is, I'm gonna throw myself in that. We don't know how to keep that course going. I know how to default back to what I was doing, even though it was bad and I didn't like it. It was still comfortable and familiar and safe in a lot of ways. And the new changes, even if I'm like really confident in where this is going, I still don't know how to keep that new fire stoked. And so I think the integration thing is a really long process of change. And I firmly believe that I'm still, all these years later, still integrating on some level that kind of initiatory psychedelic experiences that I've had and keep having. That opens me up into new ways that something will move through me, and it's like, oh, that's okay, that's different, or a different mindset or way of seeing the world. And I really love, just to go back to what we were talking about before, the community aspect. I think listening to other people's stories, holding space for someone else, being able to speak your story into a group of people that aren't trying to fix you or change you or give you advice, just hold space and kind of be there with you. It's a rare experience for a lot of people. I remember seeing that first in AA, in the recovery space, where you could just walk in and be like, hey, Collin, alcoholic, and everyone's like,
Mhm.
Welcome. I don't need to like justify my existence or explain everything to you. You know, there's chances for that, but it was just this really beautiful model. I'm like, oh, I never seen a
Mm,
free space like that that you can walk into and just be welcomed. And I think it's such a nourishing experience, especially when we're moving through integration, to just be like, yeah, I'm kind of sitting with this I have Sauron thing that like I'm scared of it, but it feels powerful, but I don't want to be big and take up space. You know, I just don't know how to do it. And, you know, people around you are just like, yeah, okay, well, that's, yeah, we're here for tell us more, you know? Um, so I think there's something in that too, that kind of community and both witnessing and being witness, holding space and having your space be held. That's also really potent in integration, not a make or break kind of thing. I think there's a lot of great individual um, integration therapists, coaches, people, facilitators, and I think the community aspect is amazing. Um,
mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that. And it's interesting to think about like how integration can look so radically different from one person to another. It's like,
Mm,
and how do even like the integration practices come from that person rather than like, okay, here's the 5-step protocol for integration. But it's like, okay,
yeah.
what happened for you in that journey? What felt meaningful? What do you want to take into your life? And how can you put that into a very practical practice? Um, like, you know,
Yeah.
one person's like, I'm going to stop and look at the lake for 5 breaths on my morning walk. And I'm like, brilliant. And I also think about like how dangerous it can feel to have like an act like a radical shift. And because the
Mhm.
nervous system's like, I don't, it can feel like those sheets of like, I don't even know who I am anymore. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
I was talking with somebody and they're like, I still feel the same. I'm still struggling. And I'm like, yeah, because if all those things that protected you, even though they also hurt you, just went
Mhm.
away, like how would you navigate life? Like those things
Totally.
that have supported you, even if you're outgrowing them at the same time, that it's not like it's like a light switch. It's like, oh, I'm
Mhm.
never
Mhm.
gonna get mad at my wife again. Like, yeah, you are. Not a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. You hear that? No, but it's true. And even
And you go
sorry,
ahead.
yeah, go. I'll just say even like your that example you're offering where it's like I still feel the same, like it's such a great insight. And it's kind of like, well, I was this way, but now I feel the same. And to your point, it's you know, we're coming up like internal family systems. I think Rick Schwartz, like I've listened to a few of his talks because he's applying the IFS model into ketamine, and
Hmm.
the very simple kind of takeaway that I heard on in one moment is like, you know, there are these protective structures, whether they're psychological structures, you know, he would call them the managers and the firefighters. Their job is to keep us safe and familiar, and they don't know what just happened. They just know you came back and we're just like, woo. And then their job is to kind of like clamp it back down and be normal because, hey, buddy, you got to go to work on Monday and you got to be like the same guy at 9 a.m. clocked in with your coffee ready to go, because your job's on the line. People, you know, all of the kind of the ideas here. So I love that that person identified feeling the same, even though that feels maybe kind of a neutral or negative observation. I think it's really powerful because again, there's a split forming, and not in a, again, not in a bad way. There's a new fork that's kind of opened, and it's just like, okay, so maybe how do I hold this new way of being and still look like the same guy that's there on
Yeah,
Monday at 9 a.m.? How do I lean into a little bit more, you know? um yeah, that's such a great, I love that. Still feel the same. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, one of my integration things that just again, like I didn't even think about it, it just sort of happened was the way I walked changed. I like walked into
Mm.
my house and I was like, oh my God, I'm not like I am a stomper. And when I walked into my house, because I was still a little bit impacted, um, and I was like, I'm not stomping, and it was just like because I was
Oh,
still kind of slightly in that medicine space, like every time now I walk, because I walk that, it's like leaving this door, going into my house. I do that pathway countless times a day. And every
mm,
time now I'm like, how are you walking? And
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not, like nobody else even knows that I'm doing it. But there's like this piece of me that's like, oh, I'm not stomping. Or sometimes I
Hmm,
do
hmm.
stomp and I'm like, oh, you're stomping. What's happening? Like, are you stressed? Are you not present? What's going on? Why are you stomping?
Yeah.
So like stomping was always kind of like oh, it's just the way that I walk. But now it's become this sort of like awareness practice from
Hmm, hmm.
post journey.
I love that.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Mm. I would love to touch base about difficult experiences though. So
Okay.
when when you've had either your own personal sessions or when you worked with people who have gone through, because a lot of times people, ketamine sort of, and I've certainly said this and I've certainly felt this, is like it can be quite gentle. It can be quite kind of,
Hmm.
I almost think of it as kind of sweet. But it also can be very intense and it can show things that you're like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not so predictable. And so and especially the way it's sort of marketed now, like if you're depressed, try this. That it's like kind of a feel good thing. And
Hmm.
but it also can bring up a lot of stuff. And so what have
Yeah.
you noticed in particular around and or like what have you noticed? And also like how have you worked with somebody who has gone through an unexpected journey or a very difficult journey or one when they came back and they actually felt worse than they felt
Hmm,
in?
hmm.
And how have you worked with that?
Such a great question. And I can feel like the resistance too, just like, oh man, it's just, and I will say just on the front end that it has been a rare occurrence. I know when I first was in the field, I think the research was saying it was something like 30% of experiences were bad or labeled bad. Um, and then like something like 80% of those 30, upon further reflection at some point, 2 weeks, a month, 80% of those 30 were actually beneficial. So bad, not always bad, in other words.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I've seen only a handful of almost like impenetrably bad or difficult experiences. One kind of like group that I found struggles, especially on the front end, is people that are, and this is a total generalization that is not true for everybody, but people that are a little bit more like type A and like controlling. So everything's really well managed. If we say the default mode network is a little bit more active and kind of maybe there's some trauma back there. There almost always is. So now we're injecting or putting in sublingual into your body this thing that's dissociating you from the
Mm,
controls, right? It's kind of and that is a 99.9% of the time that is not a good thing to be experiencing. It's like we're supposed to be here, hands on the throttle and the whatever's up there, the steering wheel. And now we're kind of asked to dissociate our consciousness from our physical body. Um, and that's a very scary thing. And so rightly so, the brain starts to fire up all of the juicy chemicals in our body start to pump because it's like something's happening here and it kind of clamps back down. Um, you know, that is definitely not all every single type A or controlling person or person that likes to be in control. But I found there's a subset that struggles with that. This would be where a therapist or a guide would really come in handy to kind of point that out, and ideally slow the process way down because that skill set should be practiced on the front end, right? And I think that's something that I struggled with in clinics is that I couldn't amend the protocol
mhm,
because I'm identifying or the person's identifying something that we need to work on more first. Um, some of those people kind of drop out, discontinue treatment, um, which is always a hard thing to see. But again, totally understand. I wouldn't want that experience either, so totally get it. And I've had a few people move through like really difficult experiences and with a courage that I can't even imagine, continue through treatment because there's something there.
Mhm.
Um, I've worked with people that I'm going to think of one person now that it just wasn't great. It just wasn't great. It wasn't great.
Yes.
And it's been about 3 years now, and they've reflected that yeah, there was something to it that changed them. It's hard to name it, hard to feel it. Don't know if I could quantify it, but there was some kind of use in that moment. And I won't go into the whole story because it kind of gives away some details there. But um, it's one of those like the bad isn't bad. Even if it feels bad and it feels bad for the next year, there is something that's kind of afoot there. There was some service in that moment. Um, I've not seen a lot of really difficult moments. You've held space for me. I'm a mover, I'm a talker, I'm just it's like it's almost embarrassing like how much how much I need from someone. So it's different. And that could be I'm thinking of one person that was similar to the way that I journey, that felt terrible for kind of taking up my time while I was holding space for them. So in that it could be a bad, like an objectively bad trip where it's just not working. It's not the right time or the right skill set or whatever. um, or it could bring up these things that it's like a really sweet, like I loved that moment with this person of like holding their hand and talking to them and just really being with them, super active experience. I loved it. It's one of the things I love the most about this work is the kind of contact, but it did bring up some insecurities and some challenges in asking for help and having their needs met and kind of taking up my time, even though I was like very much hired and part of that process. Um, so I guess I'm naming difficult experiences. And yeah, the one thing that I've seen help folks the most in those is when I've noticed when I say as kind of the person who's helping them that this is okay. I'm not leaving. I'm not judging. There's
Mhm.
you don't have to have a good experience for me to like you. Like
Right.
I am here with you. This is
Mhm.
this is why we're here. And like nothing's gonna break our connection. Because there is sometimes this idea that I did it wrong,
Mhm.
or even though I'm kind of naming this specific subtype in this conversation of the controlling person say, oh, I wasn't able to let go, or I wasn't able to just kind of enjoy myself. It's like, well, the medicine is bringing you up against these
Right.
blocks. And sometimes they're really hard. I have tons of them that I'm like, oh my gosh, there's there's another one. And it's not easy. It's embarrassing, it's humbling, humiliating when we see these parts of ourselves. Um, and so I think just having someone with you that's just like totally in it,
Mhm.
no judgment, not going to leave, can be very helpful. And again, most of the times these things, whether it's 3 years later, 3 minutes later, 3 days later, it's a an integration process. It's not the brain wants to know right now, and it's just not the way that this stuff works. It's metabolizing a lot of things. It's um, we're breaking down a lot of the things that we built in our world to keep us safe, even though they're maladaptive. And I don't want to be this
Mhm.
anymore. It's like, well, that has served a huge function for you. Like, oh, yeah, I'm gonna stop there.
Yeah. 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 I love that. I love that. And I've actually only had really, really pleasant experiences on ketamine, but I've had another experience that was very,
Mm,
very, very unpleasant. And I will say like that particular journey has stuck with me even longer than the really pleasant ones because it taught me so
mm,
many things. And even though
yeah.
I literally felt like I was in hell, uh, it also continues to be a teacher for me through those exactly like meeting those blocks,
Mm,
meeting just face to face, facing them over and over and over.
yeah.
Um, I I wouldn't want to do it again. And I'm grateful it
Fair.
happened. It's like post-traumatic growth. Like, do I want to go through that? No, that was not fun. Am
Hmm.
I glad I went through it on the other side because it was a teacher? Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said.
I would love for you to guide us through a practice if you have time for that.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
Right.
And just a heads up, I have one earbud that is draining really quickly. So if my sound changes, um, it will probably be mid-meditation at the most juicy point. I apologize in advance. So I might keep it a little bit shorter just to kind of keep the soundscape uh, consistent. So we're just going to do a quick meditation here together, and quick only in the sense of dropping in for a few minutes. So wherever you are, wherever you find yourself as you're listening to this, unless you're driving and listening to it, if you're kind of safe and in a chair, I'd like to invite you to close your eyes and just settle into your body for this meditation visualization here. And just noticing on the front end, when I offer that space to drop in, just notice how your body does it. Is it something that feels safe and comfortable and your body just kind of lines right up? When you close your eyes and drop in, does your body feel uncomfortable and restless? Are there places of pain or discomfort? There's no good or bad, right or wrong with this. Just again, observing how your body responds to the invitation. We'll start with a few deep breaths together. I always like, if you can, breathing in deep through your nose, feeling that inhale deep into your belly, almost as if you're trying to expand that breath into your hips. And slow, steady exhale out through your mouth. Feeling free to make a little noise on that exhale. Allowing the shoulders to relax, the jaw, any tightness in your arms and legs. I'd like you to bring your attention, if it feels okay, to right where the spine meets the skull. It's a really juicy part right in the back of our heads here. And just imagining that at that conjunction, right where the spine meets the skull, there's a little faucet head. Maybe that image comes quickly to you. Maybe it's a little bit of a stretch. Whether it's clear or hard to see, I just invite you to imagine that there's a little faucet head right where the spine meets the skull. I invite you to imagine that that faucet head turns. You're turning it open like you would the spigot on the side of a house. And just allowing, imagining and allowing all of that busyness, all of that energy of the mind, the thoughts, the brain, just to start flowing like a white stream of water down your spine. Each breath allowing more and more. Imagining that this bright white light water hits the base of your tailbone there and slowly begins filling up the spine, vertebrae by vertebrae. And with each spot on the spine that this beautiful, bright, white water hits, imagining the nerves associated with that piece of your spine get activated and enlivened as well. Feeling all of those nerves alive, bright, active. all the way down to your toes, the soles of your feet, ankles, your shins, your calves, all that bone and tissue down in your legs, your kneecaps. Imagining the spine filling up with this beautiful enlivening fluid, activating your legs, your upper legs, your hips, this beautiful pelvic basin that holds so much of our weight and movement. Seeing those nerves wrap around our belly, all of those organs, up into our ribs, our lungs, all of those spaces where the air meets our body. And again, imagining them filling with light, filling with bright, vibrant, healing energy. Going up into our chest, our upper ribs, our sternum, into our heart. As this energy hits our heart, imagining it sending out into the bloodstream, each cell carrying its own light to every piece of our body. And the nerves activating in the upper spine and our arms, shoulders, elbows all the way down into our hands. Those beautiful nerves that allow us to feel the world around us. Filling up that spine into the neck, in the front of our throat, giving a little love to our voice box. Helps us to speak our truth, to sing. Into the jaw that holds so much tension, our tongue, our cheeks, the back of our neck, to our eyes, our ears, all of those micro muscles around our eyebrows, our forehead, all the way up to the scalp and back around to the back of our head, right where that faucet is. Taking some deep breaths here just to feel the body electrified, alive, vital, the mind quiet. Noticing any changes in your body compared to when we first dropped in with our first deep breath to now. In a moment, we're going to shift our breathing back to connection. Again, back to opening our eyes. Noticing if you feel like leaving that faucet open or closed. Noticing if any part of your body is asking for a little bit more energy or attention, care, connection. With our last deep breath here, just really sealing in some of this feeling, some of this vitality and potency in the body. As we shift our breathing here in a moment and come back into connection to see how long we can maintain this feeling. It might drop right away, which is totally fine. It might hang around for the next year, which is totally fine. Just noticing. Our next deep breath, breathing nice deep into that belly again. I'll do a quick exhale. We'll do 3 more of those together, moving the body as we do so. Maybe stretching the neck, moving those fingers and toes. Noticing any changes in the chemistry of the body, the feeling, the experience. With this next and last one, opening your eyes. When I come back, I always like to kind of trace around the corners of the room. So really intentionally moving my neck, stretching out, but I'm also just looking around, sending my body the message that we're safe, we're here, back in this room, back here. So
That was magical. Thank you so much.
yeah, it's good for me too.
Ah. I love the nerve part of connecting to the nerves and how it connects to like to every single facet,
Mm,
the body and the being.
yeah. It's always when I remember, I'm like, oh yeah, the bones too. And there's like so much. I always could forget my bones. They're so crucial, but I'm, with stretching out my muscles and it's like, oh, the bone.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. This was such a fun
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
Just to let people know, if you don't know, we are doing an immersion, which will include a 4-day retreat. So we're going to do a lot of intentional work beforehand, and then we get to spend 4 days on retreat together. Um, in nature, doing medicine, being together, doing somatic practices. We also have Dr. Drew who will be joining us, and he'll be teaching around circadian rhythms and the ketamine molecule and just brilliance. And then we also have some time afterwards. We've got some robust integration
Mhm.
time as well.
Mhm.
So early bird registration goes until August 29th, and then our immersion starts in October. So if you have questions, let us know. All the links will be in the description. Do you have anything else that you want to share about links or anything coming up for your business and practice that you want to make sure people know about?
Um, yeah, I've got to do better about updating my website with things. This is kind of the big thing of the year. I've got a talk coming up in September at another retreat. I'll hopefully have that on my website, resonancepsych.com. It's all Sami and I are kind of connected online, so you'll find my links there too. Um, a lot going on, but we're definitely focusing on this retreat, this experiential retreat for kind of the big offering of the end of the year here. So hope to see you there.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Colin.
Thank you.
I look forward to our next conversation.
Bye.